Okay, my name is Laurel Bauer. I was born Laurel Hanson, but I grew up in Dinkytown. I grew up about a half a mile from Dinkytown. My grandmother lived in Dinkytown. My grandfather started the House of Hanson on the corner of 14th and 5th in 1932. Grandma ran it for about a decade or so, maybe two. Grandpa passed away at a Marshall High School football game. Yes, he walked in and had a major coronary and he was gone, and so Grandma took over. My dad went into the service, came back and worked for Honeywell for 12 years, and then said, I'm done working for somebody else. Walked in the store, said, Ma, you're done, and out the door she went, and in he came. And at that point, the House of Hanson was a cafe. So it originally started as a cafe, and the House of Hanson name originally came from my grandfather's initials, which was Henry Oscar Hanson. So the HOH was Henry Oscar Hanson.
That's good. And just for a quick introduction, I'm Rob Hahn. I'm asking the questions.
Sure.
It is December 18th, 2018, and we are in Columbia Heights, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So let's go back and reminisce or get your reflections. What was your first memory of House of Hanson?
My first memory, I would say I was 5, and if Mom wasn't home after kindergarten, I would walk to the store, which Marcy Elementary was my grade school, so that was about 4-block walk, and so you just went on your own back in the day. And so I would go and sit on the end stool and spin and just wait for Mom to come pick me up, and then if Dad needed me to do something, I got to get on my hands and knees and sort the penny candy. So the black licorice and the red licorice would mix, and I'd have to go and make sure that they were straightened out. So
yeah, I think you told me that that was your first job.
That was my first job. I started, so I did, things like that, take the garbage out, those kind of things, while I was starting at age 5. But I really didn't start getting paid until I was 12, which would have been my 7th grade year in Marshall High School, which is directly across the street.
What was Dinkytown like in that era when you were 5 through 12, a teenager?
It was a very busy time. We had to deal with the Vietnam War protests, ban the barn. Because Marshall High School had just merged with U High, we were 7th and 8th graders passing through Dinkytown at lunchtime every day. So we had a lot of traffic. We were the first open enrollment high school, so we had buses coming in from all over. And so with the merger of the high school, we now had all the professors' kids, and so we had really smart children. We had really, poverty kids that came out of the Quonset huts that were where people were housed, and so we had a real melting pot for a high school, and Dinkytown was a real melting pot. And we were fortunate as 7th, 8th graders, junior high students, to be able to experience the student life. And we were also allowed to do anything on campus because we were Marshall U High. So we could join in on any of the activities just with our student ID. So it was a mixture of people from all nations and shapes and sizes.
Did you appreciate it then, or did it take a few years after being out of high school to appreciate the diversity, the different elements, the culture?
I think we appreciated it at the time, but I grew to appreciate it more after I left, realizing that here we were in a not all-white school like a lot of them. We had the blacks and the whites and the Indians and the rich kids and the poor kids and smart kids and the not-so-smart kids. And it was just a really good experience. And I still meet with people today and we talk about, well, that's what we learned at Marshall. Or because we had such a different culture, we were thrown into society and just really trained as to how to treat people of different races. Or we also had the disabled students. So Marshall High School was the only high school in the city with an elevator. So they decided to put all the handicapped students there. People with disabilities were put at Marshall, and that was the hearing impaired, sight impaired, and physically impaired. So when they finished at Michael Dowling, which went to 8th grade, then a lot of them were bused over to Marshall. So that also was interesting because a lot of people, I still have many friends today that were people with the disabilities. My brother was also one of the ones with a disability. He is a polio. And so we just have a lot of connections with the people that were in that school, and it just showed us and taught us that we could communicate with people that were a little different than you.
Did the students, and I think you alluded to it, but did the students from Marshall U spend a lot of time in Dinkytown?
Oh,
Okay.
all day, every day. I mean, we walked right through Dinkytown and back and forth, and we had a completely open campus. We also did not have to eat lunch in the lunchroom. We were allowed to go onto campus, which was one of the first high schools that was allowed to do that. So Burger King was brand new. McDonald's wasn't all that old. I remember when McDonald's just said 1 million served. So that really dates me. And a lot of our students worked in Dinkytown. I mean, everybody worked in Dinkytown. It was just small jobs. Whether I did fundraising, we did fundraising for our trip to France, and I was paid 25 cents to sweep the dirt floors in the photo store around the corner, which became Century Camera, which became National Camera Exchange. But it started out as just an individual photographer. But
You mentioned different forms of protest, social activism. I want to take you through a few, and just if you could share your memories of them, or maybe specific stories related to them. Let's start with the Vietnam War.
Well, there were protests. We had a lot of hippies, hippies in our school. A lot of kids that had really strong feelings against the war, and so there was a lot of that. There were some big uprisings. So that was also University of Minnesota students, and then the high schoolers just kind of got along with them, and there was tear gas and breaking up of riots that was kind of scary at the time. I just went home because I didn't want any part of it. So
There was the Red Barn protest as well.
Yeah,
ban
the barn.
Memories of that.
It was amazing. I mean, the building. I remember the building still being there, and that they were very decrepit and needed to come down or really be taken care of. And it was not that big of a deal. But at the same time, fast food was just coming into the scene. So we already had Burger King. We already had McDonald's. So we didn't need another hamburger place. Well, if they looked at it today, and we could start adding up. When I left Dinkytown 6 years ago, I think we had 35 different restaurants, and I'm sure there's at least another dozen since I left. So it's just always been a place for people to come and gather and have a meal. And students were very good at supporting us and our small businesses.
Were you aware of, or maybe even participated in, the sit-in at Bridgman's when they were trying to move McCosh books out?
I was not. I was aware of it, but I wasn't allowed because my father owned a business in Dinkytown, and I was always pushed into my head, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, someone will always know who you are. So that had to keep me as kind of a goody two-shoes, and I wasn't allowed to do things like sit-ins or protests or that. I just stayed out of that picture because I didn't want it to reflect on any kind of views that the store might have, because there were retaliations at the time, different things I don't want to talk about, but different things that could happen to the stores. If somebody if you crossed people, there were some unsavory peoples.
Let's talk about some of the individuals, the characters, if you will, of Dinkytown. And you told me on the phone a wonderful story about Walking Phil.
Yep, we called him Walking Talking Phil, at least at ours. He never stopped talking. He was talking from the moment he came in the store to the moment he left the store, and there was never really anybody there that he was having this conversation with. He just was always talking. And he would come in, and we had a payphone on the wall back when you put a dime in a phone and made a call. And he would make calls and talk for an hour, and just on, just really deep conversations. And the secret to it all is we could pick up the other phone and hear what he was saying, and we know that he never called anybody. Because then when he was done, he would hang up the phone and his dime would come back out and he'd take it because he only dialed 6 numbers. So we always knew that, he was going to come in and something was going to be going on over in that corner with him. So it was just one of one of the many characters over the years, many colorful characters. We had another woman who would come in too, and she was the same way, just always talked, she was always having a conversation. And yet she would still converse with you, but as she left the store, she was still talking. So.
And would these be people who were eating at House of Hanson, or just picking something up, or just stopping by to visit?
Picking up. The cafe left, the soda fountain was gone in the 60s. And so when I owned it, it was all groceries. And so people came in for their daily needs, whether it be milk, eggs, bread, towels, what have you. They supported us that way. We had a lot of resident students that were lifelong students. I mean, they just were educating themselves forever. And so they would be many generations older than students. But we had several of those, and it was just what made up.
Well, you said something very interesting, that convenience stores back then were fixtures of people's daily lives for their food for dinner.
Right. You didn't have the supermarkets. You didn't have the Cubs and the Rainbows and the big grocery stores. There was a Red Owl, or there was a supermarket. But we were convenience stores, and convenience stores at the time was a place where you went and got your milk and bread and soup and meals. You got food to make a meal. And eventually it evolved so that the conception of convenience stores became chips and pop, or junk food and maybe a frozen dinner or something. It's not where people shopped for dinner anymore. And so that changed. And I also noticed a large change when the high school closed, and there were 1,000 people that came through that building every day. And there were a lot of health conscious people, a lot of doctors and chiropractors and different things. And they ate the higher end foods, and they would come in and purchase those for me. And when they were gone, that was a big chunk of my health food department that left. So I still had them as far as coming in for their lunches and like that. So some of those people didn't do the convenience type shopping, or the what am I trying to say? They didn't go to the fast food places. They would rather buy an upper scale meal, a health food type meal. And
how would you describe the relationship, the camaraderie, if you will, among business owners in Dinkytown?
I think we had a very good relationship. I was fortunate in being included in it because I was not only a business owner, but I also owned my property. So I was a landlord, so I had businesses that rented from me as well. And there were other people in that same, like the Vescios, in the same position. And we had meetings once a month and talked about what was going on in Dinkytown, and we all knew what everybody was doing. We had holiday parties, which was, all employees were included in that, and everyone donated foods and things like that. It was I thought we had a very tight-knit group where we could just make decisions, and we had summer activities, trying to bring students in, trying to keep things alive over the summer when the major students left. We'd like to keep something going in the summertime, or we would do things in the spring or fall when they were coming and going, just to keep people interested in our area.
How much do you think the closing, let me rephrase that, what impact, in addition to your health food department, did the closing of Marshall U have on the transformation of Dinkytown?
Well, I think it was huge. Besides the 1,000 people that came and went, they also supported my store. I also owned the parking lot behind, and so that was a lot of traffic that came through there. I think we lost a lot of different people that worked there. Like I said before, the doctors, the nurses, and the chiropractors, and there were foreign studies, there were foreign classes, there were language classes, and it was, again, the school still stayed a very eclectic group of things happening. And I think when that closed, it really impacted Dinkytown and took a lot out. And then I had also seen the plans and understood that once that building came down, it was the first time that there was ever going to be enough land available close to my store to cause something to come in that would be big enough to compete with me. Prior to that, it was the CVS, which was about 3 blocks away. That took about a third of my business because it was 3 blocks closer to campus. And so I noticed a huge decline with that. And then when I heard the news that a 30,000 square foot space was being set aside for a grocery store across the street from my store, I knew that the evolution of time had come, and it was time for the convenience store to be gone because there's no way I would have survived. And I was fortunate enough to see the handwriting on the wall and have the right people approach me. And I felt that when Opus came in, we worked with them and we made sure that we had we stylized the building to fit Dinkytown, not to overcrowd it. There's setbacks on it, and try to keep the street life active with retail that was functional for the area.
Was it a difficult decision?
It was a very hard decision. I was 4th generation in this business, and I did not want to be the generation that I didn't want to run it into the ground or lose it because of mismanagement. So I felt that I still management to the best of my ability as long as I could. But once I knew that something was coming in across the street that would compete with me more than the CVS already had, I knew that I was done. And so I had watched Dinkytown over my lifetime. I have seen pictures and talked to my family and relatives. I know what it was 80 years prior when my grandfather bought it, when things were still being delivered with horse-drawn carriages. I'm like, the horses aren't here anymore. We're now getting stuff, and the small delivery trucks aren't here anymore. We're getting stuff delivered in 53-foot semis, and it's time to move on. And I just had to throw in the towel.
Was there any pushback from other business owners?
It was huge pushback from other business owners and the preserved Dinkytown. It was a very, very stressful time in my life because I appreciated Dinkytown more than anybody knew. I don't know. It just was home for me. I spent 44 years in Dinkytown and supporting it and being on the committees and promoting it and just trying to keep it. But at the same time, progress was coming through, and student housing needed to be there. There was a lack of student housing, and when I made my decision, I had no idea of the ball that was continuing to roll after Marshall came in and our building came in, and then another couple apartments went down, and there was a lot of building going on in the last 6 years. But I don't think any of it's bad. We still go to Dinkytown all the time. There's still a lot of people walking around. The businesses are staying in business, so there has to be people to keep the businesses running. And if you have a captive audience, by having them live there, they're going to shop there.
So we were talking about the closure of the high school, Marshall U
I
High
see,
School.
as a high school.
As a high school. But then the building lived for a number of years.
Right.
After.
So in 1983 was the last graduating class. The school had declined in enrollment immensely. When I came in 1969, we had so many students that we still had to use a building on the University of Minnesota campus, which is why we crossed through Dinkytown every day. So we were still using an entire building on campus because our enrollment was so huge. And it just dwindled and dwindled and dwindled down to that we were under 1,000 students in the building, and that was 6th grade through 12th grade. They had just added the 6th at the last year, my last year in like 1975. So there were a lot of, you had a good amount of, so you had a junior high and a senior high in the same building, and we still couldn't survive. So yes, the students supported Dinkytown, but it was different. It was more like the candy bars, the pop, the soda, that kind of thing, where once the UTEC came in, you now had professionals. And so you had a different, and so I continually evolved. And every time something closed, for instance, the hardware store. Then I put in hammers and screwdrivers and things like that. Every time something left, the stationery store left, I put in index cards. And it just was always like, I tried to be there for everyone and fill all the holes just so that people wouldn't start going somewhere else.
When you look at the development of your former land, other places in Dinkytown, can you look back and point to one or two pivotal moments where you could say that's what set this whole development into motion?
The moment I heard that the high school was coming down.
The structure itself.
The structure itself.
Okay.
Because at one time I had heard that what they were going to do, which they have done to other buildings, and the idea before, the original idea that I had heard was the building was going to stay, but they were going to gut it and add another couple of stories to it and make it condos. That type of thing, but still having the grass, the setback was huge from how far back from the street it was to where it is now. And as I watched the building come down and the dust flying and myself just standing there watching brick by brick come off every single day, that building and then they started digging the hole and it got closer and closer and closer, and it was just like smothering me out. It was just really, it was hard to watch, but it was also part of the evolution. It was part of progress. And I think it's made it's still Dinkytown. And I think it's still coming back. It's still coming alive with new things coming in. And I don't think you see the entrepreneurial that you used to have just because of the way life is. I mean, property is so expensive. The property taxes down there are expensive, and it's difficult to rent to just somebody coming in saying, "Oh, I want to make jewelry and sell it," or I'm going to do weavings and have this little shop. That just isn't feasible in an area with a tax base that high.
Having spent 44 years in Dinkytown, what was your favorite era and why?
Probably from age 16 through my college years. So, let's see, like 1974 to 1980, just because that I was kind of a free spirit, and you were a student and you could take advantage of all the life and fun that was on campus. And after that you had to kind of get to work and support yourself and I was able to enjoy it as a high schooler and not have to be so concerned about my studies or my future life. Where was I going to end up?
Was there ever any question that you would take over for your dad?
I was never going to take over for my dad. So I was 17 when my brother passed away. He was a gymnast at the University of Minnesota, and he was done with his tenure as a gymnast for a regular athlete. He was working out for an alumni meet, and he was on the high bar, and he did a double back somersault, and he only did it 1.5 and landed on his neck and broke his neck. So he was my dad's business partner and my dad's son and my brother. And I had to fill that hole. And so that was part of that era of he passed away in 1974. And I had been in the stores all the time, but I was looking for colleges, not knowing where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I planned to go away to college because all my friends went away to college. So my plan was to go away, but I was 17, I was a senior in high school, and I knew my dad needed me, and I knew the stores needed me. If he was going to survive emotionally and, financially, I felt that I was needed. And so I kept my foot in the door and I stayed, and I worked there until the week before our first child was born. And I kept my foot in the door while the kids were growing up. We have 4 children who also worked through the store. Worked at the stores, went to the University of Minnesota, put themselves through college. We helped a little, but we also said, you're working, and they learned how to do things. And this, Dinkytown was a great place for them to learn the same sort of things that I learned, and just that how people live in life. They weren't stuck in a small town setting. They were more in tune with real life.
What am I forgetting to ask about? that you want to add?
What are you forgetting? What's he forgetting to ask me? Oh, okay, good. He points to
How you met
himself.
me.
Yes, I met my husband in Dinkytown. I met him my first quarter freshman at the University of Minnesota. I would have not met him because I was going to go away to college, and instead I stayed at the university. We met in a class, family social science class, the class of the dynamics of dating, courtship, and marriage. He was an athlete for the University of Minnesota. Actually, he was roommates with Paul Molitor, and they were the last team to go to the College World Series, and with the Minnesota Gopher baseball team. So he was a left-handed pitcher. We never ever met again by accident after that first semester. So he was in my class, and he was my referee for intramural football. So those were the two places that I met him that semester, and after that I never ran into him by accident again. Perry also helped support me in the stores, and he was the breadwinner here, not me. He got the insurance. It was one of the reasons I could continue to run the store as a woman with 4 children, because he had the real job, he had the insurance, he had, and so I could not have done it without his support. And so that was, again, part of that period of time from the 70s where I met him, and was a fun time on campus and going to the games and being part of it and being part of the University of Minnesota. And sometimes we look back and go, did you really get it? My daughter said, did you really get it? Did you understand you were dating the co-captain of the baseball team? And I was like, it didn't go to my head. We just had fun with it. So.
You have any questions?
You talked about some of the entrepreneurs, like Lowell Lundeen, his jewelry
Yep.
store. You want to talk about some of the others?
Lowell Lundeen was a wonderful jeweler. He was also renting from my dad in the building prior to the building that I was in. So the first building was supposedly, actually, I'd heard that it was moved from campus. So it was an old campus building moved to Dinkytown, but it was like multiple buildings shoved together, and then we had room for other retailers. So we had Lowell Lundeen, we had Dave the Barber. Dave the Barber is a character that needs to be remembered as well. Wonderful man. He was in Dinkytown a lot of years, very supportive of Dinkytown, the parties and the, keeping everybody together. And barbers are like that, they know everything and they talk to everybody. So we had those. We had other small businesses coming and going in our space, and so it was always fun to get to know them, as well as all the restaurants. I knew every restaurant tour because when they ran out of something, they came to me, and so they kept me alive as well. And so that was always good, and people respected me for that. I remember Blarney would come over and he goes, "There isn't anything you don't have," or Al's Breakfast would come in and then he'd want horseradish. I said, "I just can't keep horseradish on the shelf for when you come and need it every 6 months," because I would put it in there and then he'd buy one and then he wouldn't come back until 6 months later when it was already out of date. So it was fun to be there to have everything that people needed. That was my goal, was to never let anybody leave without what they came for or whatever. It was a challenge for me to keep everything. I had 40 distributors. And so I got things from all over the place, including shopping myself and trying to get the good deals and trying to keeping things within the price range of my clientele.